Good morning. This is Inside the FLX from FingerLakes1.com. I'm Ted Baker, and it's our monthly conversation of birding and wildlife and habitat conservation with Chris Lajewski from the Montezuma Audubon Center, Route 89 in Savannah. Welcome back.
Good morning, Ted. Great to be with you.
We're right smack in the middle of spring migration of waterfowl, and it's interesting. We were talking about this before we went on. If you're disciplined, you can look out at one of those big flocks and maybe pick out something a little bit different. You might see a giant flock and think, oh, those are all Canada geese. I was down in Seneca Lake the other day and saw in the middle of a bunch of Canada geese what we think was a greater white-fronted goose. So
right.
if you're very careful and scope in on all those different birds, you never know what you'll see.
Migration season is an amazing time to visit the Montezuma Wetlands Complex. There are millions of birds moving through right now. They're moving from their wintering grounds, which have been down in the Virginia, Carolina areas, and they're stopping here at Montezuma on their way north to their breeding grounds, which could be up in the tundra of Canada, a good 2,000 to 3,000 miles to the north of us here. We've already seen the big push of snow geese. Hundreds of thousands of snow geese have already come through the Montezuma Wetlands Complex, but we still have about 3 dozen other species of ducks, geese, and swans migrating through, so it's a great time. Over the last couple weeks, we've seen a couple of unusual bird sightings. The tundra bean goose has been found at Montezuma Wetlands Complex. Now, we haven't seen it in the last week. We saw it earlier on in March. That was mixed in with a flock of snow geese and Canada geese. This tundra bean goose should be over in Europe and Siberia. So it's come across the pond over here to Montezuma. Amazing. We've never seen it at Montezuma before. That's a new species for us. Another unique bird sighting was the Eurasian widgeon, another bird that should be over in Europe this time of year. But on occasion, birds get caught up in a wind, and that they get pushed over across the big pond over here to the United States. And sometimes the reverse happens. Sometimes our North American birds head over to Europe and Asia.
Now, we know in the case of the Canada goose, some migrate, some stay. How has that proportion been changing, if at all, over the years?
We have seen an incredible change in the number of resident Canada geese. The number of resident Canada geese that are here now year-round is increasing exponentially. At the same time, the migrant Canada goose population has continued to decline. And so therefore, we are managing the Canada goose population differently. So the early hunting season in September is just focused on the resident Canada geese, and you can harvest in New York State, across most of New York State, 15 geese a day. We're trying to bring down that population. At the same time, the migrants don't come through until more like October, and in which case you can only harvest 1 Canada goose a day during that season. So because the plumage of the two subspecies is essentially identical, it's really challenging to differentiate the two. DEC has these 2 separate hunting seasons for Canada geese.
Is there any particular reason why the waterfowl migration happens first before the songbirds?
They are closest to us here in the Finger Lakes region when they're on their wintering grounds. Again, these ducks, geese, and swans were primarily down in the Virginia, Delaware, Chesapeake Bay area for the winter months, so that's only about 500 miles from the Finger Lakes region. They get moving first. The south winds start to blow here in March. They take advantage of that south wind and get up here fairly quickly. At the same time, we're also seeing the red-winged blackbirds and common grackles, which again were species not too far to our south during the winter season. The birds that come later on, warblers, vireos, Baltimore orioles, hummingbirds, they typically winter over in the Central America and South America areas 2,000 to 3,000 miles away from us. It takes them a little bit longer to get here.
And by the way, if you want to keep track of these sightings on the Montezuma Audubon Center website, you've got a link to the ebird program that we've talked about. So some more citizen science and more crowdsourced science. I have the app. When you see a bird, you report it. It knows where you are, so it tracks it geographically, and then everybody in the community can see if there's something rare around.
Exactly. The ebird is a great resource if folks are new to the Montezuma Wetlands Complex and they're not sure where to go to see thousands of waterfowl or a unique bird species. They can download the app or go to the website, ebird.org, type in an area like Montezuma Wetlands Complex, or they can type in a species of bird that they're interested in finding, and information will pop up directing people to those areas.
The Onondaga Lake Conservation Corps is a beautiful wildlife photography exhibit coming up. Before we talk about that, remind us how you got involved with that organization.
Well, we're celebrating 10 years of conservation efforts and community engagement through the Onondaga Lake Conservation Corps. I'm the director of that Audubon program, and it's been a wonderful partnership between Audubon, Honeywell, our local Audubon chapter, which is the Onondaga Audubon, and so many other organizations and corporate supporters. At the same time, we also have community members coming out and helping us with 90 acres of wetland restoration and shoreline restoration. We're also leading STEM education programs for students all across the Syracuse community. So it's been a great effort, and this year we are celebrating our 10th anniversary of the Corps through this photography exhibit. It's a great way to highlight the birds or the wildlife that have returned to these newly restored areas. We're going to have 30 images on display coming up here Saturday, March 26th from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. where folks can enjoy these photographs, talk to the photographers who took these amazing images, and also learn from ornithologists from Audubon about the birds or the wildlife that have returned to the lake. This event is going to be over at the Honeywell Onondaga Lake Visitor Center, which is very close to the State Fairgrounds over in Syracuse, New York, coming up again this Saturday from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m.
We've talked about how nationally one of the biggest conservation success stories of the last maybe century is the restoration of the bald eagle, but also the restoration of Onondaga Lake. I mean, that water body was about as close to dead as it could be, and now here it is, this thriving wildlife habitat again.
For much of the last 100 years, Onondaga Lake was considered to be one of the most polluted lakes in the country. Very few fish species were living in the lake. Very few bird species were living around it. Certainly no bald eagles there. Maybe a few waterfowl species and a few songbirds, but that was it. And then with the cleanup effort that was conducted by Honeywell over the last 20 years, the worst of the pollutants have been removed. The wetlands have been restored. The shoreline has also been restored. And Audubon's been involved with that. We have engaged the Central New York community through native vegetation plantings, invasive species removal. We've also been documenting the resurgence of birds and other wildlife through community science activities. It's an amazing transformation, and now you don't have to go to Alaska anymore to see dozens of bald eagles all in one location. You just go right behind Destiny USA in downtown Syracuse there and enjoy dozens of bald eagles. The high count this year for bald eagles at Onondaga Lake, over 60.
Wow. Well, and the other thing that's great about this is it shows people that it can be done, that you don't have to think. Where I grew up in New Hampshire, the Androscoggin River was heavily polluted from paper making waste. The paper mills have mostly shut down, and now that's become a habitat and a recreational resource. And I mean, for people of my generation, they would have thought that was impossible back in the 50s or 60s.
I regularly hear from people who grew up in and around Syracuse that they remember a time when you wouldn't go near the lake. There were no recreational opportunities, no reason to go to the lake, really. That has all changed. There is now a wonderful community trail that goes about halfway around the lake. There are people We're down there this weekend, biking and jogging and walking and birding as well. I was down there with some friends with a spotting scope and binoculars, and so many people were asking me, "Wait, are there bald eagles down here?" I said, "Yeah, there's 24 of them right down here. Keep walking, and you're going to see them in the trees and soaring overhead." The community interest in the lake and the access to the lake has increased so much over the last 20 years, and Audubon's been proud of to be a part of that effort. And so really looking forward to this weekend and showcasing the resurgence of the lake and having the community come out and see 30 wonderful images.
A lot of people don't know what we have. Again, when we were on Seneca Lake the other day, a lady came up and didn't realize that there were swans. We were watching some swans on the lake, and so, yeah, sure, there's swans native to New York, or at least passing through.
That's right. Yes, tundra swans are still moving through the Finger Lakes region right now. Again, that's a species that primarily was down in the Chesapeake Bay area for the winter months. They're heading way north to the Arctic to breed. We have a native swan species that is here pretty much year-round now, the trumpeter swan. Fairly newer species. It's been the last 50 years or so that species has been in the Finger Lakes region. So that's a really beautiful bird, large white bird. The mute swan is the one species of swan we have in North America that is not native. It's an invasive species. It can outcompete our native waterfowl for habitat, and it can even attack canoers and kayakers, I've been told. So
That's good to know.
Species that you want to steer clear from if you see it out on the waterways.
So let's take a look at our spotlight species for this month, one of the most colorful waterfowl we have, and that's the wood duck.
The wood duck is just a gorgeous bird. Both the male and female are really striking in nature. I call the male the rainbow-colored duck because it has just about every color of the rainbow, highlighted by a bright green head, a white chin strap, a little bit of black on the sides. It has a bold red eye that's unique for our ducks, and it also has some blue and white patches on the wings. The female, on the other hand, is mostly brownish gray overall, but it has a unique white teardrop around the eye. It stands out from all the other duck species, again with the blue and white patches on the wings. This wood duck species is a breeding bird here in the Finger Lakes region. It's one of our few breeding ducks that we have. It nests in cavities, so naturally in holes in trees, but if folks put out a wood duck nesting box, then wood ducks could be attracted to places like swamp habitats, wetlands, even creeks and rivers in our community. So a species back 100 years ago that was on the brink of extinction because of habitat loss and overharvesting. That's a common theme for a lot of these species, but because of conservation efforts and reducing the amount of birds that can be harvested over the course of a season, the species has rebounded and very common breeding bird now at the Montezuma Wetlands Complex.
If anyone wants to learn more about all these migratory waterfowl we've been talking about, tomorrow night you have a virtual presentation on the annual migration through the Montezuma Wetlands.
That's right. Wednesday, March 23rd, 6 o'clock in the evening, we're going to be offering this virtual presentation. It's a great introductory program to what bird migration is, where people can go across the Montezuma Wetlands Complex, and we're going to highlight some of the bird species that can be seen right now. Being such a huge area, 50,000 acres, the Montezuma Wetlands Complex can be overwhelming and daunting and confusing for people. And so this opportunity here, this virtual program, is going to be a nice snapshot at highlighting bird migration, where people can go. We're also going to highlight some of the threats or challenges that birds face during this long and arduous journey, and what we can do in our backyards and in our communities to help birds during this migration season. So if folks go to montezuma.audubon.org, click on our programs and events button, they'll see this program listed. It's online reservations only, and they're also going to see a lot of our in-person programs coming up as well.
What are some of the challenges they face? Is I can imagine one would be habitat loss, if there aren't as many of those wetlands around in North America when they make their trip up and down each year.
That's right. Habitat loss is one of the biggest threats to birds and other wildlife. Some of the other challenges, especially with songbirds and even these waterfowl that are migrating through right now, most of these birds migrate at night. They use the constellations, the position of the North Star, the position of the moon, if it is out, to navigate between their wintering grounds and their breeding grounds. And because they use the stars, our urban light pollution has a very negative effect on these migratory birds. It can confuse them. And so Audubon is involved in this Lights Out campaign. So from this time of year right on through the month of May, we encourage people and urban centers, urban cores to turn off their lights at night to help birds during this long and arduous journey, reduce the confusion so they can focus on the constellations and get to their breeding grounds to continue their species.
You have a number of birding tours. They're very popular. As of now, this could change in a few moments, so sign up. April 1st is open, and it's wonderful. We went on one with our whole family a few years ago and just enjoyed it completely. We made friends with some of the other people that were on the tour, and we learned from each other, and it was just a lot of fun.
Well, on a Friday afternoon, April 1st, we still have some openings for a guided birding tour. Almost all the other programs that have taken place here this month have sold out. So April 1st is our next tour that still has availability. I'm sure it's going to fill up, so we encourage folks to go to our website again, montezuma.audubon.org, click on programs and events and register there. But this is a unique opportunity to experience the Montezuma Wetlands Complex. Again, for new birders and experienced birders alike, we offer this guided tour experience. Now, we're not putting people in our van quite yet. We are starting to consider that. We're going to take the spring season and see where we are in terms of COVID coming out of the spring season. Hopefully, we can get back to that in-van experience here during the summer months. But as of right now, we are still having folks follow our van in their own vehicles. We give everyone the Zoom conference call phone number so they can hear our educators narrate the tour. Our guests can ask questions in between the 3 or 4 stops that we will make, where everyone gets out of the vehicles and birds together. We have spotting scopes and binoculars available for people to borrow during these experiences. Just an amazing time. We're going to have the waterfowl still moving through. Songbirds will continue to move in. We're going to have more swallow species. I saw my first tree swallows of the season here over the weekend, which is always a great treat. Killdeer have come back into the area, of course, American woodcock as well. And then by early April, I would imagine we're going to have some more unique species, some southern songbird species, as well as the birds of prey coming back into Montezuma.
And one of the neat things about these tours is you learn spots that you can then go on your own after, because some of the spots on these tours are not on Audubon property or National Wildlife Refuge property. Some of them are just right off of Route 31, for example. So they're easily accessible places. I don't think a lot of people realize how easily accessible this great bird watching is.
There is about 20,000 acres of public land within the Montezuma Wetlands Complex. About half of it is down at the Montezuma National Wildlife Refuge, half up on the New York State DEC areas in Savannah. Now, I also want to say that the Montezuma National Wildlife Refuge Wildlife Drive and Visitor Center remains closed until April 1st.
Right.
But that being said, there are still so many areas to enjoy, to see the birds. So many wetlands that are now thawed out, finally, are holding so many birds. The waterfowl, the birds of prey, the songbirds are all in there. So this April 1st is going to be the first opportunity for folks to be driving out on the Wildlife Drive.
And another thing a lot of people might not realize is how much habitat management you do. It isn't, you can't just, in a perfect world, you'd say, well, just leave it alone and let nature take its course, but that doesn't always work for the benefit of the wildlife. So you put together teams of volunteers each year that help do things like remove invasive plant species, and you've got one of your volunteer events coming up.
We have volunteer events now scheduled right on through the entire spring season. So starting in April going through June, we're going to have opportunities every Wednesday and Saturday for people to come out and help the Montezuma Wetlands Complex. Work side by side with Audubon, the National Wildlife Refuge staff, as well as New York State DEC biologists. We're going to be removing invasive plant species, planting native vegetation, and also going into some newer areas, some areas that we haven't managed yet, and do an invasive species assessment. So it's not a removal focused project. It's going to be assess the grounds, the conditions that will help guide future work. So this is very, very important work that we're doing here through this spring season and the rest of the year that we're doing these volunteer events. The unique thing about this is you're working side by side with like-minded individuals as well, community members who share your passion for birds and nature and conservation efforts. After a morning of work, and we start at 9 o'clock in the morning typically, go till about noon, then we'll have lunch for everyone. The Friends of the Montezuma Wetlands Complex provides lunch for all of our volunteers at all of these events, and just an amazing program that we've been doing now for about 15 years, and it's really had an impact. We've seen successes where we didn't used to have species like the cerulean warbler, now thriving. Bald eagle population continues to increase. Waterfowl populations are on the up and up, which is tremendous success story, and in large part because of this volunteer effort. So if folks are interested in learning more, they can go to our website, montezuma.audubon.org, scroll down to about halfway down the page, and they'll see all of our volunteer opportunities.
What are some other ways that the public can support the work of the Montezuma Audubon Center and the Onondaga Lake Conservation Corps?
Well, we are a nonprofit organization affiliated with the National Audubon Society. So we do have memberships for both organizations. We have an upcoming fundraiser event. Our annual benefit is on Monday, June 13th. It's going to be over at the Wayne Hills Country Club. So a nice afternoon of golfing, followed by a wonderful dinner right there at the country club. We have sponsorships available, as well as participants can register for that event as well. And then volunteer opportunities outside of the habitat restoration work. We need volunteers inside Montezuma Audubon Center. Right now we're seeing 50 to 60 people a day coming through wanting to know where to see birds during this migration season. So we're looking for folks to help us at the information desk, answer questions, guide people around the center, but then also guide them and lead them to areas outside of Montezuma Audubon Center, tell them where other trails are and where they can go and drive on their own. We also need some assistance with our animal care. We have live reptiles and amphibians that are native to Montezuma in terrariums inside Montezuma Audubon Center. They need constant care and attention, feeding, clean water. So opportunities for everyone to give back to Montezuma Audubon Center.
All right, Chris, thanks. We always appreciate the update. I'm a huge bird watcher myself and try to get out in the kayak from time to time, and we appreciate your time as always.
Thank you very much, Ted.
Chris Lajewski with the Montezuma Audubon Center and the Onondaga Lake Conservation Corps. Inside the FLX has been produced by Nate Sharman. We've got some great Zoom interviews coming up this week on Inside the FLX. We'll let you know about those. Until next time, thanks for watching.